The photographers amongst you will probably already know about Lightroom and what it can do for your still photos, but video people pretty much don't have a use for it. So what you video chaps might be asking is, what's the big deal about Lightroom? What's so good about it that I should take the trouble to incorporate it into my video production workflow? Well, this is a panorama I took in the mountains of northern Laos 11 years ago on a digital SLR far less capable than the ones available today. I wasn't even using a great lens. I was backpacking, storage space was in short supply, and I shot in JPEG rather than RAW. I never used these photos because they just weren't good enough. And looking around this, you can see all sorts of problems. 11 years later, I have a rather dull looking shot suffering from noise in the color channels. I'll just show you a little bit of that. You can see there's a patchiness here, and there's chromatic aberration around some of the highlights, and there's a host of problems, as well as a generally flat, hazy look. So let's see what Lightroom can do with it. Well, in the best traditions of television, I've got one I prepared earlier, and this is the unedited version. And this is what I managed to do in just a few minutes of editing, applying Lightroom adjustments to correct each problem. It's not a final version by any means, but I think you'll agree it's a lot better and is now a very usable landscape. Just to show you again, flat and enhanced, flat and enhanced. Now that's a lot better than you could possibly do with any of the video grading, color grading tools and that sort of thing, like speed grade. Which leads us to the inevitable question of, how can we incorporate this into our video workflow? So here is a piece of video. This was shot with my Phantom 1 some time ago, and it's a fairly flat piece of video shot with a GoPro. It wasn't a particularly sunny day, so the contrast isn't great. The GoPro was exhibiting its usual array of problems. To start with, lots and lots of chromatic aberration. As we come round to the caravan here and the roof of this shed, you can see there's a colour fringe here. We've got a bit of a contrast problem there as well. It's really not that white in reality. So how can we make this look more real? Obviously, we could take all of these individual frames into Lightroom and edit them individually. But wouldn't that take a long time? Well, not really, because the thing about Lightroom is purpose-built for making the same edits to a whole load of photos at the same time. To extract the frames from the video so that we can edit them as stills, we can use Adobe Media Encoder. Just drag the video to the encoder queue, and then find an image sequence such as this TIFF format. TIFF makes a good format because it's lossless. This video has already had the indignity of losing a lot of the original data from the GoPro sensor when it was first recorded, so we don't want to lose any more by using JPEG at this stage. My original video clip was 50 frames per second. If I use this 25 frames per second preset, I'm going to extract only half of the original frames. So it's important to ensure that you've selected the correct frame rate for output. Just match it, and OK. As soon as we press start, it's going to start extracting those frames. That'll take a few minutes. Once we've exported all the frames, this is what we end up with. A folder of TIFFs, sequentially named. These can be taken into Lightroom, like this. And you can see it's got a sort of purpley cast to it. Well, I can probably clean that up a little bit with the tint buttons, just by edging the tint towards green rather than magenta. The next thing I'm going to do is going to develop mode, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. You can't zoom in a lot because these are not big frames. These are just standard high definition 1920 by 1080 frames. But you can see there's some chromatic aberration around here. So I'm just going to hit the remove chromatic aberration checkbox. So the next thing I may want to do is flatten out the image slightly by taking down the highlights. I really don't like that reflection off the roof, so I'm just going to take down the highlights and I'm going to increase my contrast. Oh, that looks a lot better already. Some of these black areas really are black. They're very, very shadowy, but they're not showing up as black. So I'm just going to reduce the blacks down a little bit. And that's given me a very nice, contrasty, oversaturated look. I'm just going to take the tint down ever so slightly more towards the green. Now, this might be a little bit oversaturated for your tastes, so by all means take off a little saturation and maybe up the vibrance to compensate. And just do it until you think it looks how you want it. You may want a hyper-real look, you may not. So next I'm going to up the clarity a little bit, and that just makes each of the edges a little less fuzzy. Next I'm going to warm the whole thing up just a little bit with the color temperature, because I quite like a warm look. And now I think I've got probably slightly too much exposure, so I'm just going to reduce the exposure ever so slightly. Now, I don't like these edges. They seem to have gone all fadey. I don't like faded edges. So I'm going to use the post-crop vignetting just to add a little vignette to the whole thing. I'm going to keep it well feathered, but I'm going to keep it also to the edge and make it quite a dark vignette. Yeah, quite like that. So if we treat that as the reference point, that's how I want the whole video to look, then how do I make all of the frames look that way? Well, it's very, very simple. I just select all the images, make sure that this one I've edited is the selected frame, and then just go sync settings, and we get this box here. I can just say select all, synchronize, and then the magic occurs. We've now applied a photographic edit to every single frame in that clip. If we just scroll down to the caravan and that shed roof, I just want to show you what it's done to those. So looking at this caravan, it's a little better looking than it was, and this shed roof also. You'll still get a little bit of chromatic aberration, but don't worry too much about it. This is a video. This frame will be on screen for hardly any time, and so it's a general look we're after. The other thing you might want to do is to use Lightroom's noise reduction features and sharpening. Let's go and have a quick look at that. This is in develop mode. We have sharpening, so just hike it up, see what it looks like. Well, that looks rather nice. Again, we're not going to be looking at this close up, so you may want to give it that over sharpened look. Now there will be noise problems, so I'm just going to randomly hike up the noise reduction, and there's a very good reason for doing that, because of course GoPro footage is noisy, especially on a day like this was, where the light isn't great and you're not going to get an enormous signal to noise ratio out of that GoPro sensor. So I'm just going to synchronize those settings again to the whole load of photos. As you can see, you can just do that in no time at all. The other thing that's important to realize about Lightroom is that it is a non-destructive editing tool. Each of these TIFFs has not been touched by Lightroom. All it's doing is coming up with a load of settings to superimpose upon that TIFF. Of course, we can't incorporate these back into a video until we've output a new copy of the TIFF with the changes, and that's what I'm going to do next. If we go down to export, choose the same folder as the original photo, but put in subfolder edited. They're going to be named with their original name, but I'm just going to add a piece of custom text as well, just so I know it's edited, and everything else I'm going to leave pretty much as is. So Lightroom goes and does its thing. It will take each of those frames and apply the changes we've made and output a new TIFF. This is going to take a while, so I'll come back when it's all done. Once we've exported the edited frames from Lightroom, we need to reassemble the frames back into a video clip. An easy way to do this is using Apple's Quicktime Pro. You've almost certainly got the QuickTime player on your computer, but you may not have upgraded it to QuickTime Pro. But don't worry, it's a very inexpensive upgrade. QuickTime Pro offers us this option, open image sequence, and you can select the first frame and then it'll open the entire sequence. It's important to open the sequence using the correct number of frames per second. This was originally a 50 frames per second clip, so I'm going to open this using 50 frames per second as the frame rate. If I didn't do this, if I chose 25 frames a second for example, it would slow the footage down by 50% before we get it into Premiere Pro or After Effects. And you may want to slow it down. In fact, I do with this clip, but I want to do it in Premiere Pro. So then you just open the first image. It doesn't take long, and soon comes back with a preview of the video, which we then save as a standalone movie. And then it's ready for whatever else we want to do with it. And there it is. Here in Premiere Pro, I've imported the exported edited footage. I've put it into a nested sequence. I've applied warp stabilization just to clean up any wobbles, and then I've put that nested sequence into another sequence and reduced the speed to 50%. And it should be very smooth, except this is on an unrendered preview and you'll see it suffering from running screen recording software at the same time. I've actually put the final footage onto YouTube for you, and you'll see a link at the end of this video. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. My name's John Silver, and I hope I've taught you something useful. I love receiving comments, so please comment on my videos. Thanks.